Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your latest instalment of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, hosted by myself, Craig Gray, the independent Rangers podcast made for fans, by fans, and as always, all of our content is free. You can get us over at gersnet.co.uk, where you can see the forum, lots of articles, and you can get over on Twitter as well, at Gersnet Online. Just before we get into the podcast tonight, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Forrest Precision Engineering. They are a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for many years, and we're absolutely delighted that they're backing our podcast. You can get them over at forrestprecisioneng.com, and you can also visit the Forrest Precision Executive Lounge, a stunning new hospitality area within the historic Nick Stand. For information on how to book this unique and intimate space, you can email the club via hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Just before I introduce my guest tonight, we're fully aware of the incident that happened last night in Lisbon, where sadly one of our own didn't make it home. So just before we started, we want to give our condolences from everyone at Gersnet to the family of Thomas, and our best wishes to his loved ones, his friends and family at this difficult time. It's an incredibly sad situation. You can't really put into words how terrible it is, but our thoughts go out to his family and friends at this tough time. But of course, we're here to talk about that game last night that took place, and here to discuss it with me is my guest, Rob Forrest. Rob, not been on for quite a while actually. It's not a bad time to be back on, is it?
No, luck of the draw, I think. Aye, good to be back on, but just to echo your kind of what you said there, Craig, as well. Thoughts and prayers with all the family and friends. The fan that sadly died. It's you shouldn't be going to a game of football and not coming home. So puts a bit of a somber note on it.
No, it definitely does. But of course, we'll get into that match last night. A 2-2 draw. Again, another credible result in Europe away from home at a stadium. I think we're unbeaten against Benfica. I don't know if I played them before a couple of years ago, but we've got this thing about being in the lead against Benfica and throwing it away. We seem to do it every time. And like Connor Goldson must be one of the only guys in the history of that stadium I like to have scored own goals in both ends. What was your thoughts on the game overall, mate?
Oh, I mean, absolutely delighted with the result. I think you ask anybody and we probably would have bitten your hand off to come away for a draw. I think on the balance of play, probably most days are feeling disappointed, but then they come away with a lead for that tie because there wasn't many clear-cut chances that Benfica actually created. It's ultimately two kind of, I would say, mistakes. One of them's a different set of rules that we're getting in the SPFL from a handball point of view, and an OG for Big Goldson. But I thought the players battled for everything, which is what you want to see. And you could tell that towards the end of the game, some of them were really flagging, but we're still trying to push and give it their all. And I think it demonstrates, I guess, how threadbare the squad is at the moment with injuries. We went away to Benfica. I think probably four of our frontline players that would normally be starting not available for selection. And actually, we probably deserved to win that game last night. So it was, the result is great to bring back to Ibrox. It's just really unfortunate that we never held out and kept the lead.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing as well. Even at 2-1, we've got a big chance with Fabio Silva, where I think everyone's shouting, just put it across the keeper. It's like, it's like the thing that every coach tells a striker, hit it low and hard across the keeper and he'll probably score. But I thought he had a great game last night, to be fair to him. But in terms of, the start, Benfica, I mean, you mentioned it there, mate. It was, people turn around and say, they dominated the ball, they dominated possession, which it's true, but come to think of it, I mean, Butland made a couple of great saves, but I don't really remember them creating any high-quality chances. And at the end of the day, the 2 goals that they've scored, one was a penalty, which, God knows if it's a penalty or not. We'll come on to it shortly. And the other one's, a disastrous own goal from our point of view. We're under no pressure. So I think, we definitely are disappointed that we never got the victory, but it is a decent result. But that first goal, it was brilliant, and I don't want to say against the run of play, but it kind of was. In the first 10 minutes, Benfica have been up the pitch a couple of times, had a few corners. They're applying early pressure on us. And then the ball breaks us in the midfield. Diamande goes on a nice wee run. Everyone's shouting, edge, 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 when they see Tom Lawrence running in. And I think Tom Lawrence said when the ball comes in, he just put his head out, shut his eyes and hope for the best. And the best happened. It was a great goal, I think.
It was brilliant. And like you say, it was good to see Diamande involved in another goal. Silva did some great work on that left hand side again, but it was a lovely dink ball back just into the danger area, and Lawrence, kind of like Scotty Arfield, a bit of a delayed run in to the danger area, creating a bit of space for himself and getting on the end of it. And after a shaky few minutes to begin with, I think I would have loved to have been in that away end amongst the Rangers fans there, because the limbs must have been brilliant.
Aye, it would have been absolute bedlam. After that, it's kind of the same old story in the game. Benfica dominating possession, but we were always looking pretty dangerous on the break. Eventually, on the stroke of half time, Benfica get the penalty. A very strange decision. I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and recite the IFAB rules for everybody, because that would bore people to death, right? But I do think there is a thing in there in the rules about if it's came off the player and it hits his arm, it's not a penalty. The only thing for me that might have caused them to look back on it is it's almost as if Souttar's using his arm because he kind of knows that, the ball's either going to hit his head or it's going to go behind the guy. So I think it's almost as if he's maybe put his arm out as a layer of protection. And once he's hit the ball with his head, it's going to hit his arm anyway. So that might have been why they gave it. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's very, very unlucky. I think I was surprised as well with the angles that the referee was given, because if you've seen the angles on TNT Sport, we could see from behind the goal where it's absolutely clear that Souttar heads it onto his arm. But the angles that the referee's shown, it shows Souttar maybe getting a touch of the ball with his head first. So I think that's what maybe another thing that the referee was deciding, did he hit it with his head first? So very surprised that they didn't show that angle, and it was reminded me a lot of the Dortmund game a couple of years ago when Morelos' goal got chopped off and they never showed the angle from behind as well, like we seen on the telly. So I thought it was very unfortunate, very unlucky. What was your thoughts on that penalty situation?
So I was exactly the same, Craig, to be honest, because you see everybody then posting the IFAB rules, etc., and you realise that it's he's headed it onto his own hand. I think there was something interesting I did see on Twitter for John Walker, and it's the distinction of the different competitions. That in UEFA competitions, that is actually still a pen. They're going to change the rule next year, but in domestic competition, it is to that IFAB rule where if you head it onto your own hand, then it wouldn't be a penalty. So it's not like the governing bodies to keep things simple and have one set of rules for every single competition. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion has come from. Live watching it in the game, I was raging that it was a penalty, because you quite clearly see Souttar heading it, getting the contact with his head. His arm is outstretched, but he's got nowhere else to put it. He's coming over the Benfica player and he heads it onto his own arm. So from that point of view, it was extremely disappointing that we got the decision against us. But there's nothing you can do in those situations. Once the referee's made his mind up, we're not going to keep going on about conspiracies and referees being out to get us like other clubs. We take it on the chin, and then we just got to part and score again. That's kind of what we do in these games.
Well, that was it. I mean, other teams could have went up the park and scored after the decision didn't go their way at the weekend, but that was brilliant. I mean, you kind of feel, deflated. I'm shouting, let's just get into half time and sort of reset. Dujon Sterling has other ideas. The guy's just been an absolute revelation. He's just an absolute machine. I think that's the only word to describe it for him. And I'm so glad that he's finally got his first goal, because he has been in a few advanced positions in previous games, and I mean, you can tell he's a sort of defender by trade with some of his finishing, but luckily he just stuck his boot out in the right place at the right time last night, and it paid off. There was another VAR check for offside. I mean, I was confused about what that was as well. I don't know if maybe it was Goldson being down, and then was Goldson maybe interfering with play, then you realise he's about 50 yards onside. and then the camera looks at Dessers and you're like, oh, you've definitely just done something, haven't you? It's like, surprise, surprise. But the goals given, and again, it came down from that left-hand side. I think it was Yilmaz that put the ball across. I thought he was brilliant last
Silva.
Silva, sorry.
Yeah.
But that left-hand side, considering we didn't have any natural wingers playing out there, I think to have both of the goals come from that side's very pleasing from our point of view. But it was a great ball in, and as I say, Sterling just sticks his boot out, and it's too worrying. It's even more limbs than that at the end.
No, absolutely, and it was a great kind of run from Sterling as well, because again, if you look at the wide angle when it zooms out, he's well outside the penalty area as that move's developing on the left hand side. And for all I criticised Tav in the first half because I thought Neres was getting the better of him far too often, he did a great job in anticipating the break of that ball, sliding it down that left hand side, and then Silva has the kind of shot come cross, and Big Douche is just there to stick it in the back of the net. And you're right. I think if a player sums up what Clement's done to that squad, it's him, because there's just a willingness for him to go on that pitch and play wherever he can get a game, and that he's just going to give you 110% when he sticks a jersey on, regardless of which position it is he's playing. And I think that's the type of attitude and feeling that's around the squad at the moment that Clement's brought in. Everybody seems to be fighting for each other in that team just now. And that's heartening to see, because I think if you contrast where we were and before he came in and where we are now, there's a marked difference in attitude for all the players. Even Lundstrom and stuff towards the end of that second half, you can see he's blowing at his backside, but they're still giving everything that they can to try and get over the line and get the result. And that's down to the spirit that we've got in the team just now. I think that'll help us as we get into even more important games as the season comes to a close.
No, absolutely. Going into the second half, nothing much happened. I mean, to be quite honest, we had that chance with Silva. As I say, I think he should hit it across the keeper. I think the manager mentioned it in his post-match interview as well. That for me was a bit of a disappointment, because I think maybe the issue is such with Silva, and I'll use that word because I can't think of another one, is maybe he's not as clinical as you're wanting him to be. But to be fair to him, I thought he was excellent on that left-hand side, provided something very different, almost as if it was kind of a disguise for Yilmaz to get into great positions and overlap, and he liked to cut inside a few times. I mean, where do you think Silva's best position is? Because I don't really know, to be quite honest. I mean, he's not an out-and-out number 9. Clement doesn't even want to play him as a number 10. Is he actually playing as a left winger, or is it just like a left-sided forward? I don't know, but one thing's for sure, he's a very, very intelligent footballer, and he definitely enjoyed the goal that we scored last night anyway, the first one anyway.
Aye, absolutely. I mean, I was a bit critical of him, and I had a bit of an exchange with Grant on Twitter about it, and it was more just because the showboaty elements sometimes, he was probably doing them in a little bit of the wrong position, the little flicks of the back heels, and for me that was the only criticism I had of him last night. I thought, other than that, he was fabulous on that left hand side. The work rate that he put in, he always looked a bit of a threat. He was really intelligent with the kind of space that he was picking up on that left hand side. And I think going forward, we're going to be lacking width, given the state of the injuries that we've got with the wingers at the moment. That position on that left hand side, if he can still perform to that level, then I think that'll be really good going forward, because there's no doubt he's going to naturally drift to try and support Dessers or whoever's going to be playing in that 9. And if he can use that as a bit of a benchmark last night, he's only going to improve in that position the more games he plays there. But I think him and Ridvan had a really good understanding of when Ridvan was coming inside, he'd stay out wide and vice versa. So if they can develop that, get Campbell back in the 10 potentially when he's fit, because him and Silva looked as if they were building up a bit of relationship as well before he got injured, then we're going to have some really good options going forward.
No, I agree. Connor Goldson. obviously we all seen the goal last night. He's not been having a very good time lately. It's a strange one because I love Big Goldson. I think he's been brilliant for the club. He made, I think it was his, I don't know if it was 300 or something like that appearance a couple of weeks ago. Incredible achievement. The guy's fit as anything, plays every game, always does his best. But this season, I think it's probably been his worst season. Maybe, I don't know, maybe his whole time at the club. And I think maybe his first season there was a few teething issues. Like he was making a few mistakes, but you could maybe understand it given where we were before, and you could see the potential in him. But I think now, after seeing how good he's been the last few seasons, to see his performances dip, it is a concern. The thing that I'm kind of worried about now, is this just a blip with Goldson? Should he be dropped for the next game? I mean, I don't think he'll get dropped, but I think maybe a bigger question moving on to next season, do you think we should be looking at succession planning for Connor Goldson, maybe trying to bed someone into the team next season and for him to have actual one-on-one competition? Because I think that might be part of the reason that when Goldson does put in a bad performance, he never gets dropped the next game. He knows that his place is 100% secure now. I think John Souttar plays the same side as Connor Goldson, but we've obviously seen them develop a pretty decent partnership recently. But I do think that it might be beneficial for the club, certainly next season, to look at trying to bed in someone else into the squad. And it doesn't even need to be to sort of slowly move Goldson out. It could just be to have competition, that you're directly up against a guy for a position and you know that if you make a mistake like you did last night, you're going to get dropped on Sunday. It doesn't need to be like, we're bringing in a replacement.
No, and I'm the same. Listen, I think Goldson's been a great defender for us. I think it is natural that when you see a player starting to make the odd mistake, questionable decision making about letting balls bounce rather than going and attacking them, every player that plays in that team is going to be open to criticism if their form dips. I think part of the problem is Goldson plays his best football, in my opinion, when he's got a different partner next to him. I think him and Balogun brings the best out of Goldson rather than with Souttar. There always seems to be this, mistake in each of them when both of them are playing together. And I don't know if that's part of the problem, is that because he's got Souttar next to him, maybe they don't communicate as much as Balogun and Goldson do when they're on the pitch. So therefore, they're maybe left trying to cover each other. And I think that was probably, if you look back at the goal, something that happened because somebody's either not shouted or he's just completely ignored the shout for that OG, because there's absolutely no danger behind him. Mm-hmm. And he shouldn't be going for that ball. So somebody should be screaming at him to leave it and communicating to help him make the right decision. And it doesn't look like anybody's done that. So he's tried to take charge and made a really bad mistake. Now, I'm not going to say, I've seen some stupid stuff about Goldson going to cost us a league. He's not. He's one of the best defenders that we've got at this club. Everybody's got a mistake in him. I think it'll be interesting to see what the lineup is on Sunday and whether Balogun comes back in and how Goldson plays at that point. The other thing to say is, he is getting older. I know he's only 31, but the amount of football that we're playing and he's ever present in that team, we need to be in a position where we can rest them to get the best out of them. It's the same with Tav. Tav's not getting any younger, and to have them both being effective for us, at some point we're going to need to look at players that are going to be able to come in and challenge them in those positions, but equally that can step up in the games or against a Dundee, against some of the Livingstons of the world, because ultimately they're going to need a rest to recharge their batteries. And I think that's probably one of the things that we're seeing now, is there's been so many games that they played in that it's maybe just a bit of tiredness that's keeping in, and that decision making is suffering as part of it. I don't think he'll be dropped, because ultimately I think him, Butland, Tav form a really strong partnership in the defence. It's probably just going to be about who's partnering him at the weekend. I'd be very, very surprised if he wasn't in the starting lineup. I think he definitely won't get dropped, but it's definitely an interesting point.
another one, people call me crazy, and I don't rate him at all, but Ben Davies, see one thing about him, I always thought that Davies was pretty decent in the European games with Goldson. Like even last year in the Champions League, you know, the times where we looked defensively a lot stronger and weren't getting gubbed was when Ben Davies was playing alongside Goldson. You could see that they did form a bit of a decent enough connection. You know, Davies done well and, you know, tried to claim Seaman's goal against Betis in the first game. I think Davies played against Betis in the last game as well. So I think certainly for the European games, you know, it could be a shout to play Davies alongside Goldson because you do have that sort of natural balance with each other. And I do think that in terms of intelligence, I think Ben Davies is probably a more intelligent defender than the likes of Suter and Balogun. But you know what, they two guys are, they're incredibly powerful, but I think Goldson and Davies actually complement each other quite well. That being said, I still want him to get sold in the summer for somebody that can actually defend. But I just think maybe for the European games, you know, it could be something to look at.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the interesting point will be the summer, because if you look at the players that we signed in January, and I know we'll talk about one of them in a wee minute, you know, young players that have a point to prove, that have got good quality, that's who I'd like to see us bring in at centre half, because that's, you know, you talk about succession planning, that allows them to learn from the likes of Goldson while they're there, but also they'll be hungry and they'll want to push to get into that starting 11. So it'll give Goldson and Suter a bit more of a fight at that centre half position. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But no, I mean, I think it is just a blip from Goldson's point of view. You know, the amount of folk that I've seen with some really harsh criticism, it's just ridiculous. But then there's always a whipping boy that eventually comes out. 9 times out of 10, it's usually Tav. And I was a bit critical at his first half, but the second half I thought he played really, really well. And you know, the one thing about Goldson and Suter last night was the number of times where they threw their body on the line, and none more so than Goldson for the second goal. You know, he takes a bad one for the keeper, getting in there to try and challenge. He was brave for that. Just thankfully the ref didn't stop for a head knock, otherwise it wouldn't have scored.
Aye, I know. That would have been interesting, wouldn't it? We mentioned him earlier, Rob. Diamande, brilliant for the first goal. I really like this guy. I think he's just came in and he's been amazing. Sorry if you can hear that in the background. There's gritters cutting about, so unfortunately I can't do anything about that. If you can hear it, apologies to the audience. But no, Diamande I think's been absolutely brilliant since he came in. What we have needed from signings, more so in January, but any site, it doesn't matter what window it is, are players to come in and make an immediate impact. It's so refreshing that in this window we signed 3 players and all 3 of them have made an instant impact, albeit we know about Cortez's injury and that's unfortunate, but at least in his short space of time he's made an impact. You know, he will have done something that will have contributed at the end of the season. But Diamande I think's just been brilliant. He does have a mistake in him, I will say that. I think you've seen it at the Kilmarnock game where he kind of loses ball in the midfield and then he goes to grab the Kelly player back, and luckily Jack Butland's there to save him. So he can do that, but the guy's energy is just incredible. And I think as well, just his both feet actually, you know, you've seen the goals that he scored, his left foot and his right foot, and then the cross he put in for Lawrence last night. It just seems to be the sort of ultimate sort of box-to-box agility midfielder that I think we've been missing since probably Joe Aribo left.
I think he's got the potential to be a great player. To be honest, I think you're right. You know, the left foot, right foot, the 2 goals that he's scored in those first 2 games. You know, he's a young player. He's going to make the odd mistake. I think the good thing that I love about this signing is, yeah, we've paid, you know, a fair chunk of money compared to what we would normally pay in a player, but the potential of what we could get back on him, I think, is pretty exciting. As long as he keeps that development going, you know, I think he as you say, he's come in, he's slotted in really well. You know, he's contributing to the team straight away. There seems to be a real belief when he's got the ball. He always wants to drive forward with it as well. And, Clement's been true to his word when he said that, he wants to cut out that shit lateral pass. And we see that from the players that we've got in midfield now. There is a real desire to get forward. And the other thing that he's brought is, and I'm assuming it's something that Clement's told the players to look at, is he's not scared to have a dig for the edge of the box as well, which is what we've needed. So I think there's a lot to be excited about there. And I made the comment, I think after the game last night, that if this is the signal and the sign of what our signing policy is going to be moving forward, then actually it's going to be quite exciting, because if we can pick up, players like this from lesser known leagues with a bit of sell-on value, suddenly, your player trading model looks a hell of a lot better than it's ever been, because we'll keep them for a few years and then we'll sell them on, and ultimately that's what we need to get used to. It is bringing a player in, developing them, and then selling them for 2, 3, 4 times what we've paid them for. And hopefully along the time, while they're here, they'll contribute to the team and they'll be successful. But I really do like him. I think him and Lundstrom complement each other quite well in the midfield, and they're working really good as a pair. I think he's a fairly strong lad. He doesn't shy away from putting his foot in when needed, but he's also pretty good with the passes. We've seen for Lawrence's goal. It was a lovely little dink right into the danger area for him to get onto the end of. So I think he's been brilliant, and really looking forward to see what he can do after a couple of months under the manager.
No, absolutely, completely agree. And here's hoping that his good form continues. A direct question about the game last night, Rob. What would you say pleased you the most about the performance last night? Or not just the performance, it could be anything. What pleased you most about last night? And don't say finding out about Bill Leckie's dating profile.
Everybody's known about that for years, so that's not a surprise. Yeah. I think for me it was just the fact that you look at how many injuries we've got. Right, we've got no natural wingers there, but we still had the balls to go and take the game to Benfica, and on their patch. That's a team that hasn't been beaten in Europa League, and we were only behind against them last night. We'd taken the lead twice. Many teams after that setback of getting a dubious penalty given against them might have felt sorry for themselves. But as a squad and as a team, they just rolled the sleeves up and got back on it. And there's so many times where I think in the past, when we've had a setback, we probably would have went into our own shell and felt sorry for ourselves for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes and completely lost our head in the game. Whereas I think it all comes from the manager. He's fairly level-headed. If any time you listen to him in a press conference, he's just focused on the next game, the next period of play, the next goal. He seems to just drive the players on to think like that. And so for me, the pleasing thing was that we were only behind, and that we actually looked a real threat going forward when we had the opportunity. A hell of a lot more clinical than we were against Motherwell.
Well, that wouldn't have been difficult though. No, that's a good point, and that's what we love to see as Rangers fans, just sort of digging ourselves out of nearly impossible situations. That's what we've done our whole lives as Rangers fans. So it was good to see that continue last night. I mean, I think for me personally, the most pleasing thing, you mentioned it earlier, this sort of team of succession, because if you look at the players who made the most impact last night, you're looking at Lawrence, you're looking at Diamande, Sterling, Yilmaz, Silva. These are guys who are either completely new to the club or have got very limited experience in playing in these big European games and getting results for us. But they were the guys that stepped up last night. And actually, your more senior players, your Tavs, your Lundströms, your Goldsons, I'm not going to say they were terrible, but they were kind of taking a back seat to allow these guys to go and express themselves. And for me, that's really pleasing that we've already had that crop come through that have had a great European runs and success and whatnot. But now it seems like we've got a new crop coming through that are going to be capable of doing exactly the same. And that's really pleasing, because it's very... normally in Europe, especially with clubs like Rangers, you'll have a good 5 or 10 years and then you'll be rubbish for 10 years and then you might be all right for 5 years. It's very up and down, up and down, up and down. But I think Rangers should be at a consistent level in Europe, and it's probably been the most consistent that we've seen Rangers in Europe the last 4 or 5 years. And I think now that we've got players in that are looking to improve on that, get better, and maintain the standards that have been set by the team before in Europe, I think that's really pleasing, and I'm really glad that's been the case.
Absolutely, and I think, for me, I think a lot of that comes for that word belief as well. I think the players have all bought into what Clement's trying to build there. I think as a manager, he's made it very, very clear, or it seems to be that he's made it very clear to these players what he wants, and if they deliver for him, then they'll get the rewards. And you can see that on with the way that the players are going out. Cantwell hasn't been happy when he's maybe been shoved out to right wing, but he's done it, and Clement has managed that situation well. Sterling's come into the team, doesn't matter where he's playing, he's happy to be playing. Silva has come in, as you've said, and he started as a 9-10. He's over on the left hand side now. They've all bought into, we want success. This manager's going to give us success, so we're all on board with him, and whatever he asks us to do, we're going to go and do it. And it might not be the prettiest of football at the time. Again, one of the best managers, if not the greatest that we've had, the Honourable Mr. Smith. He knew how to get the best out in his second spell, with that run to Manchester. And that was back of the walls defending. That was a squad that was built on playing for each other and playing together. So if Clement can get half of the success that he did out of this squad, then I think we'll all be happy fans come the end of the season. But it is that togetherness in the squad that I'm really pleased to see at the moment, considering how difficult the first half of the season had been.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. It's been brilliant since the new manager came in, and long may that continue. Before we move on to our next topic, guys, just need to give a shout out to our other sponsors, and that is Football Prizes, who are an organisation that specialise in football competitions and match draws. You like their latest prize? It's a chance to win a one-of-a-kind Paul Gascoigne signed Rangers shirt display with built-in LED lights and a TV showing the charismatic midfielders' Ibrox highlights. You can get them over at footballprizes.co.uk to enter the draw. Or get us over at Twitter at Gersnet Online, where you can get a link for that as well. So that's definitely a nice prize to look out for. Next point I wanted to mention, Rob, going into the VAR and referees this week, because I think it is important that we mention it, and because I think it's maybe borderline dangerous, some of the stuff that's been coming out this week. We had a call against us last night that was just as fortuitous as the penalty that was given against Celtic on Sunday. The response you've seen from both managers was a complete 180. Brendan Rodgers blaming everyone but himself, but the team, but the board. It was all John Beaton's fault. Philippe Clement, I don't like the rule, but it is the rules. We get on with it. I think for me that kind of just shows the difference in levels of class, and I think you're quite clearly at the moment seeing a manager on the other side of the city who just seems to be creating these mental narratives to try and drum up support off a fan base that he lost 4 or 5 years ago. And I think he knows that, regardless of what happens this season, his earlier powers have definitely waned. And, for me, Clement's comments last night kind of summed up that man, and exactly what we want to see from a Rangers manager, in my opinion, in terms of the way that he commands and handles himself.
Absolutely. Let's face it. I've said this for a number of weeks and months now. VAR is not the problem. The problem are the people that are using VAR and the referees that we've got behind it. They're not of the right quality and the right standard. If we really want to grow our game, get more TV money, then there needs to be a wholesale change at that level. And for me, it isn't wild conspiracy theories that referees are all out to get us. If it is, it's the worst conspiracy theory in the world, given the trophies that Celtic have won over the last few years. The fact that if you look at who's been given the most penalties awarded this season, in the SPFL at Celtic, it's not the referee's fault they've missed the most. It's and it's great to hear, managers come out and moan about the decisions that are given against them, but he didn't say anything about the dodgy penalty that was given for him in that Hearts game. So when you fail to criticise all of the decisions that go against or the referees get wrong, that's when you lose the argument. In my opinion, he was laughing at the wrong decision that was made in the Old Firm game when the free kick was given against Essers and that goal was chopped out. The handball that Johnson made in that whole bizarre situation about people making up offside images and stuff, they were quite happy to lap it up then. And I think you're right. It is just a massive deflection tactic at the moment by Rodgers to try and create a bit of siege mentality between the fans and the team, because ultimately he's trying to cover for his performances. Apart from beating the feeder club Dundee 7-1, it hasn't been a good run of games. They've surrendered an 8-point lead to a Rangers team that they thought was gone halfway through the season, whereas Clement has come in, galvanised the fans, galvanised the players, all of the injuries that we faced, and has still got us in a title race after such a disastrous start of the season. So it's no wonder that he's trying to point fingers, because he's not going to take responsibility for the shit job he's done himself. And I think that's what it is. And until managers stop doing that, we're never going to get to the real crux of the problem. Half of these referees that we've got up here shouldn't be refereeing football matches. You look at the performance that Muir put in the Motherwell game. It was ridiculous. The fact that was a clear red card that was missed, and he didn't even give a free kick or a yellow card for that, sums up the state of referees that we've got in Scottish football. Now, there was no inquiry needed. Clement says his piece and then he moves on to the next game. Now, granted, there are times where the club will raise the issue with the relevant authorities, but we're not the only club in Scotland that will do that. I think for me, full-time refs is something that we've definitely got to look at up here. You can't have, what we're calling a top-tier football league in world football with part-time refs who are school teachers and have other responsibilities. If you really want to grow the game of football in Scotland, make the referees professional, invest in them, but also penalise them when they make mistakes. In any walk of life, if you make a mistake and if you continually make the same mistakes, you're going to face consequences. These referees don't have any consequences, which is part of the problem as well. They don't get demoted that often to the Championship or League One if they'd had an absolute stinker. And that's something that I think the governing body needs to look at as well, because if there are no consequences, they don't care if they get the decisions right. Most of them are using VAR as a crux these days, especially when it comes to refereeing Rangers. But as we see, when other clubs are refereed, the decisions are given quite quickly in their favour. So for me, it's just all a cover-up. I think naming certain officials the way that he's done is very, very dangerous given the history. And I think it was very irresponsible given that person that he named wasn't responsible for any of the decisions. All he did was highlight it to the referee to ask him to go and look to make sure that he'd made the right decision. And it was the referee that changed his mind. It wasn't the person in the VR room.
And that's the thing as well, Robin. I wanted to mention Rodgers sort of sounding out John Beaton specifically. And the thing is with Brendan Rodgers, despite a lot of people probably thinking otherwise, maybe quite rightly, he's no stupid. He knows exactly what he's doing when he makes statements like this. What has happened in the last week since he made those particular comments about John Beaton is you have had, Celtic's, whipping boys in the media, fan media groups coming out, making up stories about, Photoshop pictures 5 years ago in a pub in Bellshill. The whole Rangers fans named their supporters club after John Beaton. Not ever. They just put it up as a flag because it was funny, because Celtic fans were moaning about it for weeks on end during the winter break. So someone thought it would be funny to wind them up. This is the level that these people go to whip up conspiracy theories. And you mentioned it earlier, John Beaton, after that Old Firm game in 2018, he received threats to his life, his home, his family. 3 people were arrested for doing that. And for Brendan Rodgers to go and mention that guy's name, it puts all the blame, all the deflection onto that particular official, an official who has received those threats in the past. So I think it's deeply irresponsible. And something else that I've seen as well this week is something that another pundit, a former Chelsea striker, an interview that he was involved in, and they were talking about, is John Beaton a Rangers fan? Well, that's the one that they mentioned up in Scotland. You seen Bobby Madden doing an interview with the BBC last year where the questions being asked to him are you a Mason? And it's like, I don't understand like this sort of narrative that's trying to be painted that, this ref's a Rangers fan, this ref's a Rangers fan, blah, 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 because let's face it, right, you know, half of the Scottish population is probably going to be split down equally in the Old Firm footballing population anyway. The chances are the referees that we get, some of them are going to have grown up supporting Celtic, some of them are going to have grown up supporting Rangers. It's completely natural. You can't get away from it. So why are we only talking about the ones who may or may not support Rangers? Why aren't we talking about the ones that may or may not support Celtic? Why isn't that being fed in the media?
Yeah. And you're right, it is, you know, and let's face it, John Beaton's that big a Rangers fan that he decided to book Alfredo Morelos for receiving a clothesline for a Hibs player. Remember, that's how big a Rangers fan he is. He gave him a yellow card when he was on the receiving end of a clothesline. Referees are just incompetent up here. I don't believe that there is a bias or somebody's out to get you. You know, I understand that Walsh is allegedly a Celtic fan growing up, but he's just a terrible referee. I've seen him referee school games the way that he does the SPFL games, and he's just as bad. Yeah. You know, he makes terrible decision after decision. It's because they're not very good, because it's a sideline, it's a part-time thing for them, and they don't focus on it. And until you change that, we're never going to get better officiating. All of this is done is to drive the narrative, so any 50-50 decision that comes up in a really important game, maybe on the 7th of April, is going to go to that side of the city. That's all this is for. All they're trying to do is create an unfair advantage for themselves. And they've got lots of media placements that will whip that frenzy up. And it is unfortunate, but until something's done about it, they're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep applying the pressure through the Celtic-minded pundits that are out there. And equally, the other side of the city will say, we're doing the exact same thing against officials. So you can't have it always. For me, they are very good, but I think when it gets to the point of naming individuals, it is a very dangerous precedent. And you've got to remember what happened to Dallas as well, over at that stadium. You know, fans running onto the pitch to try and attack him, getting a hit in the head and split open the head with a coin. It's not the first time they've done stuff like this, and it's not going to be the last, because the big bad Masons are all out to get them. But it just is, there's no conspiracy that exists, unfortunately.
Well, you're right, and that's the thing. We've seen a lot of Celtic fan groups this week, guys that have got connections and, you know, access at the club, coming out and making accusations about John Beaton being a Rangers fan, talking about him being in a Rangers bar after an Old Firm game because he's seen a Photoshop photo on Twitter, talking about him being a referee in favour of Rangers. But I've got some stats here and facts, and let's look at the facts. If John Beaton is a cheat in favour of Rangers, how come he didn't overrule the Celtic penalty, like you mentioned? If John Beaton's a cheat, how come he didn't just give Shankland's goal and ignore the offside? If John Beaton's a cheat, how come Celtic have won 75% of games that he's refereed, compared to Rangers winning 70% of games that he's refed? That means statistically that Celtic are 5% more likely to win a game that John Beaton's refereeing than Rangers are. If John Beaton's a cheat in favour of Rangers, how come he's awarded Celtic more penalties than he has to Rangers? He's awarded Celtic 15 penalties. He's awarded Rangers 13. He's awarded Celtic 2 more. If John Beaton's a cheat, how come Celtic have a 100% win record in the 3 cup finals he's refed them in? Rangers have been in 5 cup finals since John Beaton became a professional referee, and he hasn't refereed a single Rangers Cup final. If John Beaton's cheating in favour of Rangers, he's got to be the worst cheat in the world. And I think if you look at those stats, that just sums up how mental these people are, Rob.
It does, mate. And to be honest, the one thing that I'm going to say is, why let the facts get in the way of a good conspiracy, mate? That's ultimately what it is. You know, it is absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, I can't even remember where it was, but there was a cracking thread on Twitter that somebody posted about all the favourable decisions that a certain club had got. And I think it was like a 4 or 5 tweet thread, and it was fact after fact after fact. You know, these things don't exist. There is no big, you know, army of Masons in the SFA out to get Celtic. Right? If there are, it's the worst conspiracy in the world, given how many trophies they've won. You know, and I think that's all the thing we need to keep pointing out, that it's a pretty crap conspiracy if they dominated the trophy count over the last few years. Now, that's not to take away from the fact that they're bricking it. That if we win this league, we go straight into the new Champions League. You know, they can have all the pennies in the bank that they want, but that gap will get closed when we do win the league and when we do get into the Champions League. You know, they're worried because we've now got a competent manager, by the looks of it, with us, who has got a good structure of identifying talent around him now, and means that we're going to bring in a better quality of player. They're worried that they've seen the improvement that he's made on the bunch of duds that they all thought we had, and the fact that we've managed to wipe out that gap. That's what this is all stemming from. It's not stemming from the fact that they want to be moral victors and they want to do the best for Scottish football. If they wanted to do that, they would have backed Rangers and calling for transparency and looking at the governance within the SPFL. They don't give a toss. All they want to do is create an unfair advantage for themselves.
No, you're spot on, Rob. And it's something that will continue to happen with them. It's just the way they are.
Should be, no manager should be naming referees the way that they've done. So it'll be interesting to see.
No, definitely. But, you know, just thought we'd get that off our chest, guys. But we do have a game on Sunday to talk about. It is a big game, obviously. Every game's a big game. I love when you see that on Twitter. It's like the day of a match, everyone's like that. Yeah, big game, we need to do it. But it's like, yeah, every game's like that at Ibrox. But it is a big game. It's Scottish Cup. It's a quarter final. It's a trophy we've only won once in the last 14, 15 years. It's a game against Hibs, one of our lesser rivals in the league, so to speak. Got a good record against Hibs this year, 4-0 win at Ibrox, 3-0 win at Easter Road, and to be quite honest, both of those games could have been a lot more. I'm expecting a slightly different game on Sunday, not so much just because Hibs are a wee bit better, but I think with the injuries that we've got at the moment, we're going to be stretched, and it's probably going to be a bit more difficult than it has been against Hibs this season. Plus as well, it's a one-off cup tie. You never know what can happen in these games, and Easter Road is always a pretty tough venue to go, despite the fact that we seem to win league championships there all the time. But aye, Rob, it's going to be a tough game. I tried to ask in the agenda going forward, what do you think the starting 11 is going to be, but good luck trying to second guess the manager at the moment. I mean, I don't think he done a press conference tonight, so we probably won't find out about any injuries until the day of the game. Just like it was in the good old days, Didn't they find out anything until like a meal before the game? So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think there will be changes. I can see Balogun coming in, maybe Barisic. It'll be interesting to see what he does with Lundstrom, because he did look very, very leggy last night coming in the last sort of 10-20 minutes, and Jack came on and thought Jack done pretty well. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays Jack ahead of Lundstrom. I think he'll probably go with Silva up front, maybe give Dessers a bit of a rest. And maybe McCausland will come in to start because he seems to be okay. So I think that's what will happen. What about yourself for the starting 11, mate?
I think you're right. I think Balogun might be a cert to come back in and partner Goldson at the centre of defence. I would be surprised if he brought Barisic back in at the moment, given how phenomenal his performance was in his last game that he played for us. The only other thing
he scored against Ed in the last round, so maybe it's a Scottish Cup thing with Barisic. You never know.
Maybe, but I can't see it, mate. I think Jack might. I think you're right. Jack might come in. I don't know if he'll rest Lunny, just because of how important he is to the team. I think he might bring McCausland in, but I think he might start Silva on the left, and Dessers up front. It is going to be a case of who feels freshest after that result on Thursday, and how much recovery they've been able to get into their legs, because there was a few of them towards the end of that game that looked absolutely drained, and it's whether they can get some special coffee for Dr. Waller to recover in time for the Hibs game. The only saving grace is it's a 5:30 kickoff, so there's a bit more time for them, I guess, to recover and get some relief back in the legs until they need to play. But I think for me, the good thing is that that whoever comes in should be more than good enough to be able to do a job. If you look at the last 10 games that we've played Hibs, we've won 8, drew 1, and lost 1. So I don't think.
What was the one we lost?
In a normal situation.
Was that the game at Hampden?
I think so.
I don't remember.
I think that was the.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty good record, to be fair. I mean, that's what 80% in the last 10 games.
Yeah, so we've done fairly well. Hibs are yo-yoing a wee bit. They got beat off Hibs and Celtic in the last 6 games. They've drawn against Aberdeen and Hearts. They've beaten Dundee and Ross County. I think it's one of these ones where we've probably got scar tissue, but given how convincingly we beat them at Easter Road, I'd like to think that with the right starting 11 and the right focus for the team, it should be a game that would be able to see off fairly easily. It's going to be tough, but I think we get through, and then hopefully we can get to the international break and get a bit of a rest, get some players back, and get ready to go again, because that's when the real pressure starts to ramp up.
No, you're right. I mean, speaking of scar tissue, I've got severe scar tissue with Hibs and Cups just in general across my life. The first game that I remember playing Hibs in the Cup was the CIS Cup semi-final where we lost in penalties at Hampden. Do you mind that game? I think, did Frank de Boer miss a penalty that night? I can't remember. It was ages, and then always later on we beat them in 2008 Scottish Cup, I think, but that was after a replay. That was when Walter battered Mick through part of line on the touchline.
When I was looking at it, this is the first time we've played them in the Scottish Cup since they beat us in 2016.
Oh,
so hopefully that's not an omen that will repeat itself. But I think if you look at it on the basis of the recent form, I think while Hibs might cause us some problems, we should have more than enough to be able to see them off. I think the job that Clement's done means that we're a bit of a different animal. I think the other thing that really helps is you've got to keep a light button at the back that, if they do get a chance, then there's a really good bet that he's going to be making a cracking save to keep it out.
Mm-hmm. The thing is with Hibs as well, they're very suspect at the back, especially if they're going to play the likes of Hanlon and Stevenson. But going forward, they are pretty decent. They've got the likes of Johan Venti's decent. We all know Martin Boyle's a threat. Joe Newell, I suppose, is a decent enough player. So going forward, they are decent, and we're going to need to be on our game defensively. But like you said, it's good that we've got a goalie like Jack Buckland-Derry to bail us out if ever we do make a pig's ear of things. To maybe help alleviate people's fears about cup games, then I completely forgot about the Petrofac Cup game against Hibs at Easter Road, the 6-2 So I'll just count that as a major trophy anyway. I'll just count that as like a major cup win against Hibs. because it's probably the best thing that we've got to go back on this millennium against them in the cups. To be quite honest,
that's fine. If there's ever a note to close the show on, mate, it's that moment of massive positivity.
Well, listen, Tav scored a free kick that game. He's got a habit of scoring free kicks against Hibs, so hopefully the captain pulls it on a little belter on Sunday.
The other one that's good at scoring against Hibs is my big mate Dessers. So he's scored in both his appearances against Hibs this season. So hopefully it's 3 in a row.
Aye, well, both times coming off the bench, and they were just rounding off the wind. There were 2 really cute finishes as well by the big man. So, let's hope for a win on Sunday. Rob Blass, I'll just ask you for your prediction. What do you think the score's going to be?
I think it might be a tighter game this time. So, maybe 2-1, 3-1 Rangers.
Aye, I think it might be 3-1. I think there'll be lots of goals, and I normally don't want both teams to score. And, well, obviously I don't want both teams to score when it's Rangers. I mean, what am I saying? But normally I put that in my curtains as well. I might actually put on both teams to score in my bet builder this weekend. I just feel that the way that we've played the last few weeks, that they might score, but hopefully we're 3-0 up by that point. If they do score, and they can have a wee consolation. That group of 8-year-olds in the corner can, sing really weird things and get a buzz out of it. But that's all from us tonight, guys. We'll be back on Sunday after the game. Alec Anderson will be doing his usual post-match reaction. It's going to be John, David and Grant on the flagship show on Sunday at 9:30. All that's left to do now is thank my guests for coming on. Rob, thanks very much for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure as usual.
It's been brilliant. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to everybody that's out there watching and listening. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. You can get a podcast if you're watching it on YouTube just now. You can always rewind to the start at any point to listen to us from the start, and we'll be on all of your usual podcast providers as well. But thanks for now, guys. We'll see you on Sunday. Let's hope for another Rangers win. Bye-bye.